So I'm here just to share resources, and we set it as employers or providers or families, whoever wanted to come to this meeting. So a little bit about my background. So it hurts every time I look at this. I've been doing this for 40 years. That's a long time. It's a long time. But in that 40 years, I've seen a lot of changes. And I've seen a lot of things not change that need to change. So I'm not ready to give up. I am retiring from my university career, but I am not retiring from early childhood. I'll still be plugging away. And I've been in almost every role. So I have my own family home. I was a family home provider for several years while my kids were infants and toddlers. And then I was a preschool teacher and preschool director, and I've consulted all along those years. And then also when I moved to Washington, I became a state licenser, which was not even on my wavelength. I did not think of that. But I had called when I moved up here, I called licensing to say, hi, I'm here, new to the state, who's looking for help, what's the market like? And the more we talked, she gave me some suggestions. I interviewed for one, and then she called me back and said, we have an opening in one of our offices, you should apply. And I said, I've only been in the state like a week, are you kidding? And she's like, I think you should. So I did, and I was hired. I really, really enjoyed it. And I don't know that I might have stayed with it all this time, except when you guys changed governors, things changed. So there were some big cuts coming. And what my coworkers told me was, here's how it goes. You just get a pink slip, and they don't, no warning, this is like, you're done. And then they start bouncing people down because you have your seniority by just by your hiring, not even the department that you're in. So many of the licensors that I worked with even didn't have an early childhood background, which I thought was really okay. More and more do have background, so that's helpful now. So in my time as a licensor, what directors told me was, they're like, oh, you've done this? Oh, so you know what I'm talking about. And I said, yeah, I do. And I could give them some suggestions on how they could actually meet the standard without breaking the bank. Like a lot of times they just thought, oh, I have to build a whole new room. No, you don't. Or I have to put a whole new security system in. It isn't, sometimes that's the message that's given. It's a little bit kind of just blunt, but there's lots of different ways to do it. So that's what I enjoyed about the job. But then I had to move on because I couldn't live with the uncertainty of being the last person hired to be the first one out the door. So I went back to directing, finished my master's, and then started teaching early childhood because I know that the key to quality care is really the teachers, and it's the education of the teachers. And I am happy that the state of Washington has been bumping that up, even though I know providers are not happy. But I will say there's a lot more trainings that are required that are available through DCYF. So DCYF has really stepped up in the last couple of years, and I'm going to show you. So this is not my computer, so we'll still on it. Glasses will help. And I'm usually pretty good about switching back and forth, but I've been on my Mac for a long time. Just enter to get it. Arrow. Yeah. Which arrow? To the right. Oh, there we go. Got it. All right. So actually, could we just go around real quick and you tell me what brings you to this meeting and what information are you looking for? Can I start with you?
I ran into your husband.
Oh, no.
Okay, there's a meeting, we wanted the chamber meeting. That's why I'm here.
Oh, he's so funny.
You sent a spy.
Seriously. He said he was gonna come and heckle me. We're not.
Okay,
So he sent you. Very
You
good.
know, he sent me, I'm like, I'm gonna keep quiet, what's going on?
Oh, okay. Cool. So do you have children in?
I don't, but I see the need in the area for, you know, people that are trained to provide that service. I'm just recently, you know, seeing that they teaching courses or looking at teaching courses at the high school on that or something, or get teachers trained or certified or, yeah, I'm just.
And
like,
what's your profession here? I know that they
oh, I
don't.
work at my
And your name?
Michael Richard.
I know.
So that.
So fellow realtor. So how about when you're showing families houses?
Yeah.
Does this topic ever come up?
No, but the topic I see where, you know, people that have kids, they don't have a lot of money, they have to work for minimum wage, they gotta get their kids, send them, you know, to childcare before they're in school. And I never had kids, so I'm like,
Okay.
just kind of following the trail end of it, but I just wanted to see who you were.
Well, it's so it's a challenge. And a lot of families don't ask about childcare when they're looking for a home. They're looking at the schools, but they kind of forget about that gap in between. And more schools are stepping up to try to address some of that. So, and we can talk about that too. I'll let you go.
I'm Whitney. I'm here as a parent, but I'm also an early childhood educator, and just trying to figure out what role I'm going to play in my own journey. And this has been an amazing resource.
And your community is?
Rockland. I'm Stephanie Haig. I'm with Hope Source down the street. I live here in Cleellum, and I have a 1 and 3-year-old, so I know just through living some of the information, but also as my role at Hope Source, just try to stay informed of the conversation.
Because it comes up.
One of my children is at Little Explorers, the other one will be at Little Explorers soon, and we have a local grandma who helps us most of the time.
How long has your youngest been on a wait list?
Well, I put her on the wait list upon conception, and without a name or anything. But she could have started in June, or I'm sorry, she could have started in January, which would have been about 18 months. But we opted to start her in June just because we have grandma.
Right.
So we wanted her to wait a little bit.
And grandmas
Yeah,
are
the wait list
usually
lasted, getting her from conception to 17 months. So that's how long the wait list
right.
is. And that's with already having a child.
Exactly, because you already have a foot in the door.
We tried, and I gave up.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you want to drop that, I'm a community health worker at Kittitas County Health Network in Owensburg, and I'm just here to learn more about this. I'm interested because we do work with clients, and like, you know, all of them have kids, and the child care system is hard. So yeah, I'm just here to learn.
So you work with families.
Yeah.
Okay.
I am Teodora Moreno. I am a community health worker in Kittitas County Health Network. We are for two.
And we mostly work with the Latino community. So.
I'm Doug Fulbus, Director of the Kittitas County Health Network. Before Nicole came on board with us, I was the one trying to help get the work group up and going as it started with the network, as we were hearing a lot of concern in Ellensburg about, and more countywide, about the need for childcare. And it was actually out of our substance use response work group that we were trying to get for a grant we had. And we're like, well, what are some of the barriers to individuals getting into treatment or getting into recovery, or even just attending their jail appointments? And childcare became out of that. And once we started asking that question of anybody, everyone had an input in regards to how difficult it was. So We identified the importance and created a work group out of it, and that's kind of was the impetus for starting things like this.
I asked a question real quick for you guys. Is there a single provider in Kittitas County that's Spanish speaking?
Que sea como alguien que sabe español en que está como proveer.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple, yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's very small.
Are they family providers?
Yeah, it's, I think, como de casa. Are you guys saying like someone that like takes care of kids at home? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Like, I wanted a Spanish speaker at home, like that was my only language, and I wanted to find childcare. Is there a Spanish speaking childcare option that
I'm not, well, honestly, a lot of people in our community, they have family, extended family, so they just have someone take care. They ask them like, oh, can you take care of our kids?
Mhm.
And we even met this lady that was taking care of 10 kids at a time. So that's kind of hard to deal with sometimes. Like, yeah.
so it's more like family networking?
Yeah, family networking.
Mhm. Okay.
I'm Nicole Matthews, my community products director with the Kittitas County Health Network. For a very long time, it's just I feel like I'm always looped back into childcare. I was the licensed director over in Seattle for a while, of the school care program, and then did client advocacy, working with folks who are housing insecure, and went to try and get someone to, self-sufficiency and have children or about to have children. It's very difficult to find a home, to get a job, to those things if you don't actually have anyone who can help take care of your children and provide those early learning opportunities. So I looked into what the child care work group with KCHN, and then eventually just Googled my way and bother doing some more. So I the community products director that leads the work in the child care work group, and with that, our biggest goal is to expand quality childcare in Kittitas County, because we are known as a desert area for service. So it's been a continuous long journey and fight, and we're gonna hopefully have a new facility soon, but it's been barrier after barrier, and we're gonna continue to jump those hurdles to make it happen. But it's been a very collaborative effort, and we know it's not just, a certain person or people or like line of work or profession that is gonna drive this work. It's taken a huge community effort.
Mhm.
And so we're thankful to have, a Claudette within our reach to help us kind of guide that work and support the community.
One of the things, so how did the grant come about first?
Which, the assessment one
The
or?
assessment one?
That one was, really early on in we had barely created the work group to even have a conversation. And
Mhm.
It was 2020.
the opportunity came across from Commerce to do, mostly a planning grant ideal. You could do other things with it, but we definitely identified that we needed a formal assessment to be able to speak to those who need more quantitative than qualitative on what we needed in the community. And so that exponentially helped us in being able to present what the conditions are in Kittitas County and to help us apply for other funds, which we've received 2 different continuation grants to be able to continue the work and to pay Nicole to do the work that she does. And in addition to the capital grant, that was not necessarily us, but a couple of our partners.
Right. And that's kind of where I came involved, because I also belong to the Kittitas Early Learning Coalition, who Michelle was involved early on. And that's how I got involved. And so we knew, any of us who work in childcare or have children, we knew there was a need, but that grant and the assessment really did allow us to know how much we needed and what we needed a little bit better. And then it did open some doors. But as Nicole said, we also have learned a lot of barriers. The good thing about this, though, is because of the support of all of us, we've been able to get through those barriers. And we know that that's going to help us with the next person who goes. Whether it's a family provider or a center. I'm not singling you out. But really, even for the family providers, and as you said, you have one who is taking care of 10 kids. we really would like them to take the step to become licensed. And I know that there's a lot of distrust out there, which is another thing we're trying to dispel, that there really are, being licensed is really what opens the door to a lot of different benefits that they would actually be able to take advantage of. So the place to start, and I have to say, I'm impressed and actually really happy with DCYF. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. And so this PowerPoint will be available to all of you, and you can open the links. I'm not going to open all the links today. We're just going to kind of answer some questions. But DCYF's website, their dashboard is unbelievably improved for a provider, for a parent, for an employer looking for information. It can take you in so many, you can lose hours on the website. So it's kind of why I started with the one that you would look for if you were looking for childcare. I will see if this is going to work, but I don't.
Forgive my ignorance, but DCYF stands.
Oh, sorry.
Right there. Ah.
Yeah, it's the Washington Department of Children. I still have to look at it to remember. Children, Youth, and Families. So when I moved to Washington about 20 years ago, it was under DSHS. Then when the new governor came in, she created a whole new department, which was Department of Early Learning. I missed out on that because I'd already left. But I was really happy when they did that. When the governor a few years ago decided to put it back all under one umbrella again, I really wasn't thinking that was the best idea. I have had to eat those words because actually it turned out to be a good decision, because all of the resources are all in one place now. And so you can go onto this website. And so I just said, find childcare. So there's two ways, again, put the glasses on here. You can find out how to help getting paid for childcare, what ECAP and Head Start are. Family Friend and Neighbor Care is kind of what's going on in Ellensburg. And I don't know if they're going through the system, but if they were, they'd actually get a little bit of reimbursement too, which could help. School age care, and then other care. Child Check. Does anybody know what that is?
Oh, the search tool for you to get information about individual issues. Yeah.
Right. Right. So what it does include though, and what it doesn't include. So it only is going to give you information on licensed providers, which again, we have a lot of unlicensed providers. And when we're talking about quality, we as a network have said, we're really wanting people to be licensed and to be using licensed care. And there are several reasons for that, aside from safety. And that is really what we're looking at a healthy environment, a safe environment. Because one person with 10 children is a little bit much. I'm hoping she probably doesn't have them all at the same time. But having been in that position myself, if you're a good provider, people just keep coming to you. And when you say, I don't have an opening, they're crying and they need care, and you see the child and you're like, okay, what can I do? And so I too took on more than I was licensed for at the time. I hired another person in while I was working on extending. But yeah, I just couldn't turn those moms away who were crying with their children. And so it's really, it is so beneficial to be going through licensing. Child Check will check, it'll tell you who they are, but then you can also check their record. So if there's complaints, if there have been any issues with the center or with the family home, Now, one thing, if you're going to check that, I do ask you to encourage people to actually read the whole thing. Because there are sometimes confirmed complaints that the center did the right thing. And one of those is the centers have to self-report if something happens. So from my own experience, I had a teacher roughly handle a child, which is inappropriate. Another teacher reported it. We actually did have cameras, so I actually saw it. And so I terminated her right away because that's just not acceptable ever. And then I reported it to licensing, but what that ends up doing is showing on my record that we had a teacher who, behaved inappropriately with a child. We did, but if you opened it up and read it, it also told you we terminated her right away. So you know that that's not an okay thing where we're concerned. And then other times they'll be unfounded. And a lot of times that can happen when parents are people and they get upset with other people, providers are people, and sometimes somebody will think, I can make it more difficult for her if I call in a complaint, which is true. Because if you call in a complaint, licensing has to come and they have to investigate. So that's uncomfortable for everybody. And then it ends up being unfounded because it was just somebody trying to get back at that provider because they were angry with them. So always read the report, and then always tell people to read the report. Like if they said, oh, I can't go to that place because there's 2 complaints or 3 complaints. Just ask them to open it up and look, because sometimes it gives you the information that, oh, that is what I want them to do. But so anyways, this website will take you all through all of these different ways of checking and learning about different centers. Does everybody here know ECAP Head Start? And the difference. So again, ECAP, Head Start is a federal program. ECAP is the state version of Head Start. So, and the state version, you can have a little bit higher income to qualify. So it's income, qualified, and also circumstance. So children who are foster children are automatically qualified. Children who have some special needs can sometimes be automatically qualified. And then the parent pays nothing. And it depends on the parent circumstance. If they get all day, which is like a school day, 9 to 3, or if they get full day, which is 7 to 6, well, 7 to 5, because the state also says 10 hours is the max. And so that could be free childcare for a lot of families. We have found, have been overseeing the center at the university in Toppenish, and we found most of our students qualify for ECAP for their children, because we have a lot of students who have preschoolers, and we thought, oh, look, we can get them through this way. Or maybe they get the school day and they can pay for the couple of extra hours that they need for the end of the day. So there's lots of different options out there, but again, it all goes through licensing. Okay. Any questions before I move on?
I have a question just out of
Sure.
my ignorance, because it's
No.
kind of a new world for me, but I think I understand the many benefits of being licensed, but like I'd love to hear from you, because like for instance, there's, think of like the neighborhood kind of person who does, maybe they only have like up to 4 kids or something. Like I'm assuming you would say, I would still recommend you get licensed even if you're doing that, is what I'm hearing. Like what would what are the benefits for something so kind of small, I guess, something that's not like a big thing in a special building?
So one of the benefits is that they require you to have training. And so generally what I hear a lot is like, oh, I want to take care of children because I love children. And we do love children, but it's hard work. It's not easy. And it's all day, every day. And so having that extra training really does help you cope with some of those things. It also helps you communicate with the parents that you're working with. And you can also see it a little bit more as a business, because it actually is a business. And then if you are licensed provider, you're a licensed provider, then families can actually access some financial help to help them pay. If you're not licensed, then they can't. Now there is family, friend, and neighbor, but I will say the compensation is quite low. And the thought is, well, they're at home and they're not really doing anything. The kids are just there. And that's okay for like drop in and part-time, but you don't really want that every day, all day. So it's really all the resources that come along with being licensed, even for the family providers. And because we renegotiated the WAC about 4 or 5 years ago, the WAC is the law for early childhood. It's all the Washington codes. And now that we redid that, the family providers are under the same rules as the centers, which was not a popular development for the families because it is a lot, but it does actually help. It helps prevent a lot of problems if you are following all the rules. It does give you some extra resources and that cost you nothing. And it gives parents confidence that somebody is keeping their eye on you, right? So that is why I would say to be licensed. Now there's another loophole around licensing, and that is a program that is running less than 4 hours. And I am not saying that there are not some really high quality programs that are doing that, but then there are some who take advantage of that. And my feeling about the licensing those programs is, if something could happen safety wise, abuse wise in 8 hours, it could happen in 4 hours. It could happen in 5 minutes. So I really feel like we should have them all licensed. Licensing is kind of working in that way, but it's a very heavy lift. So I don't really see it happening anytime too soon. But I encourage everybody, for their own protection too, to get licensed, because then you have the licensing department to kind of back you up as well. And also to not be abused yourself as a provider. You know, they keep bringing their children. I can't pay you this week, I'll get you next week. A month later, they just disappear and you never got paid. There are some benefits from licensing that can actually help recoup some of that. So that's why. And really around the health and safety. That's my big piece about, I wouldn't do it without a license. So on this website also, you'll find a lot of resources for early intervention for infants and toddlers. And a lot of infant and toddlers are in family providers or with family members because, of course, you know, grandmas and aunts and uncles are happy to watch the littlest ones, right? But sometimes you notice some things are not quite what they're not meeting some benchmarks. You have some concerns. Where should you go? So of course you should first send everybody to their pediatrician because that's who should be leading the resources. But they can also inquire and look at some of these websites that will also give them other people that they can look at. Also just gives them what's normal, what's not normal. Sometimes we think it's not normal and we find out, oh, the range of normal is like this. So again, I put these together just so that somebody later can look and click on these links. And then here we are with quality. So the health and safety piece is important. The education of the staff is very important. And not just in early childhood education, but also if they're licensed, they have to have CPR first aid. I'm surprised we let parents take their children home from the hospital without CPR first aid, for.
Hey, Google, how do I see?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's had young children, choking is a huge issue. Like, I don't know how many kids I've like had to do the Heimlich on, little ones, because they're just learning and it's scary. And I've actually had to start CPR on an infant as well. So if I didn't know how to do that, I don't know what we would have done. And so everybody at a center has to have it, and everybody in the family home. The other thing about licensing a family home, it's not just the person who's watching your baby, it's everybody in the house, which is important, especially if they have teenage children or young adults living with them. You really want to know the background of everybody who's got access to your child. So that's another plug for the licensing. It's the background check, the education. And then when we renegotiated this WAC, school readiness was built in. Now, it used to be early achievers. Well, that's our next thing to talk about, but early achievers is the quality rating in Washington for centers and for providers. And when we renegotiated the WAC, they built a lot of this into the WAC, because an entity like Early Achievers is grant funded. So we all know that sometimes grant funding goes away, and then so does the program. So Washington was pretty smart about putting some of these good pieces that are really necessary for quality, put it right into the WAC. It wasn't a popular decision. When I agreed to do the negotiating, it was supposed to take 3 months. So I said, sure, I can do that, May to September, right? While I'm not teaching. It went a year and 3 months. It took us. And I also was the one who went to Olympia and said, you cannot do this during the week. You have to do it on the weekend if you're going to have providers participate. They cannot possibly do it in the evening. So for a year and 3 months, we all gave up a weekend a month. And that was Friday to Sunday. It was intense. But I really felt like we were doing something really important and really good for the industry. And school readiness was one of the ones that everybody was up in arms about. The thing is, we see, and especially now, we really see after COVID, we see how much is learned in early childhood that is needed in school. And when that's missing, talk to a kindergarten teacher or a first grade teacher or a second grade teacher right now who have the children that they miss that, many of them. And it is rough out there. I'm also a mentor for student teachers, and I've been in those classrooms, and I keep telling the teachers and my students, you really have kindergartners who are socially 3 years old. Like, they don't have the social skills. How would they? And you have to think about what everybody's been through. So it's really rough right now. But that's why, and I think that really does showcase why early childhood is so important. We are seeing the skills that the children don't have right now because they've missed out on that. And so as much as people protested, it's not a huge piece. But what they're asking is that you have a plan for the week. Like, you're going to do some, educational pieces, and it starts in infancy. It means talking to the babies, not just feeding them and changing them and letting them sit over there. Like, you're having conversations and they're learning language. The window for language is 0 to 3. And yet we don't really address it with teachers until they're in elementary school. You're like, yeah, you missed the window. We didn't miss it completely, but it's so much easier for them if this is being developed in the 0 to 3 years. So that's why the school readiness got included, and it's not a bad thing. They're not asking them for 20-page lesson plans, but they are asking that you have a plan and that you post it so parents know what you're doing. When you drop your children off, you should know what's going on all day with your children. And then that's how you can become more engaged. So we also added in parent engagement, which can be a lot of different things. It can just be a newsletter once a month to let you know what's going on, whose birthday's happening. Or it could be family nights where you all come and do things together. So it's not as prescriptive as people feel. And that's why a lot of people are like, I don't want to go through licensing. I don't want them telling me what to do. It's really that they're not telling you what to do as much as they're helping you serve the families that you are going to serve.
For school readiness, like as far as measuring that, I would assume things like I can count to 10, like that's one thing you could measure. But I've read some stuff about how like teaching kids how to learn is sometimes more important than like the actual thing that they learned one time. So like, for instance, I'm thinking of like story time, like you are supposed to sit there and listen to the story, and that's part of the learning that they're
Reading aloud.
Like, are those, like, how is it measured, I guess, or maybe a lot of different ways?
Right, a lot of different ways, and it is hard to measure those types of things, especially in the infant room or the toddler room. But you do see the language developing as they're being read to, and learning to learn. Those of us who are in this field totally believe that children learn through play, and thank heavens now there's tons of brain studies that show, oh yeah, that is how it works. Even AI, like all the AI stories have been out this week. If the robot actually learned to play, and it learned how to play soccer on its own, like they didn't program it. So like that's a little bit scary, but but also that is how children learn, and that's how we all start as children. So that's how humans learn. I think, what did I hear for an infant, doing something 3 times can set a habit. So, even just in the way that we relate to infants and toddlers as little people, instead of just a baby that needs to be fed and changed and given a toy here and there, but to actually have a plan about it. And lots of play experiences, which is how they learn. And they also are in the very concrete stage of brain development of learning. So if they don't have their hands on it and put it in their mouth, and that's how they really learn. So when you have, right now we have kindergartners and first graders who are really struggling with the counting, the one-to-one correspondence. They can count, they can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and everybody's like, oh good, they can count to 10, but they have no idea that 2 is 2. But those are the kind of games and activities that early childhood plays, which just looks like they're playing, they're just doing games, but it's a whole lot of learning going on. That's the kind of school readiness. The other thing is actually surviving with other children. Like, not hitting, not biting, not screaming, not pushing, washing our hands, getting in a line, or not even a line, but just as a group, moving as a group, walking. We've seen so many parents who are still carrying 4-year-olds, we're like, put them down and let them walk, because they then want to be carried all the time. And feeding themselves, we've also seen, children struggling with feeding themselves, because we know if you're working, it's way easier if you just keep feeding them because it's not as big a mess, but it's really necessary for that mess. So at school, they will feed themselves, and they will not starve. Believe me, the providers will absolutely help them, but they won't sit and feed them like you might do that. In the toddler and infants, they're still feeding them, like, obviously. Let's see. And again, the whole piece about license and quality is that access to subsidy and entitlement programs. So the entitlement programs are ECAP and Head Start. And that all has, well, I'm going to say TK is also ending up to be an entitlement as well. So different districts are qualifying children differently to qualify for TK, which if you don't know, TK is 3 and 5-year-olds in the elementary school, in a classroom, separate from the rest of the children. There's some controversy around it, because I'm not sure where the legislation is right now, but it was suggested that they be under OSPI, which is the state overseeing of school districts, versus licensing, which means those classrooms do not have to meet the licensing standards, which for those of us who live by those licensing standards, that's not a very popular thought right now, because that's also where some of your cost of operation is involved. And so they're going to be able to not have that. And the other piece is, depending on the district, they can put a classroom teacher who was a 2nd grade teacher in with 3-year-olds. And while they may be a very good 2nd grade teacher, or even a good kindergarten teacher, a 3-year-old is not a kindergartner. And there's a lot of differences. And if you are not educated on that, and you don't have to get training on that, I'm worried about how that's going to work out. So which is why I'm involved to try to bring that to the light.
I just came from my son's TK assessment like 2 hours ago.
You're the round home.
Yeah, but it is, I mean, I totally agree with you, and it was really interesting being in there and just kind of seeing, you know, I mean, it was all great and fun and playful, but I have similar thoughts, like, how's this gonna go?
Right.
Do you think this was you as a parent or your insight because you already have that
It's a
educational
little bit
background?
both,
Yeah.
but,
Good question.
I'm also just like, I want you. And I think that's kind of the problem that we're all here.
Exactly.
That is, other than rural explore is the only other option. Which
Especially,
Rural Explorer is
yes.
So there's no.
Yeah.
you know, So it's a struggle.
And that's the only one that's here in the county, is it?
There's
Mhm.
stepping stones, but that's like under, yeah, it's a few.
Yeah, it's like, it's a
down by
in-home,
group.
Okay.
and I guess that's more.
Is there a question, Mike?
License.
Okay.
You teach, so you teach certification classes, is that correct?
I teach early childhood development at the college level. Yes.
Yeah, it's not very.
And so that is one of the requirements from licensing, is that they have the early childhood courses through the community college, through any college. And also there is something called the CDA, which Head Start and ECAP use a lot. Licensing is kind of, they accept it, but there's just been a lot of discussion about, no, we just really want them to go to college. And what we keep trying to say is that college is not for everybody. And there needs to be options for everybody, whether college is your thing and that kind of learning works for you. The CDA is much more like module learning, but it covers the basics. Which I taught CDA too, so I think it's a good program.
Childhood Development Academy or?
And it's really a terrible name because it's Child Development Associate. So then people think they have an associate degree, which they don't. It's a basically 12 credit group of training.
They should just make it available to all parents. I'm like, they just let you take the kid home and you're like, are you sure?
I know.
I'm sure I do. But yeah, no.
Yeah, I know.
Get out. You're done. Yeah.
Yeah, my first week home with my daughter, I was like, I don't know what to do. And I actually was a child development specialist. And I was still like, but it's my baby, like 24 hours, I don't know.
I was CPR certified for infant.
I was too. Yeah, I was too.
She was choking once, and I did the thing, and my husband was like, I was waiting for him, that by the time he got to me, I was done, and I was like, I feel so like empowered.
Empowered.
I never knew we would get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I really do encourage parents to get that training as well. So here we are. This is a great PDF, which I thought I had printed to bring, but it didn't print. And it does kind of talk about the questions that you should ask when you're looking at a center as a parent. And so it's a great list of questions. They do say, oh, you should see if the center or the provider is participating in early achievers. I will give a little word of caution about that because everybody is not participating in early achievers for several reasons. One is around the subsidy. So the subsidy from the state for working connections does not actually pay the cost of care. So for every provider who takes that subsidy, they are losing some money. And they try some creative ways to try to survive and still serve the people who need that's the only way they're going to be able to pay for childcare. We have been, marching to get that up. It is up. It's up quite a bit since I first started here in Washington. As a licensor, when I went to the centers who were predominantly subsidized because they were in an area of lower income and people couldn't afford childcare, which doesn't have to even be a certain area anymore. It's just very expensive. After maybe 2 or 3 weeks of visiting centers and finding them out of ratio all the time, like meaning they had way more children than they should have had with the people they had in the classroom. Then I started, why is this happening? Why is this a constant thing? And then I realized because the subsidy was so much less, they were over enrolling to try to make up the money. But then that makes them, over ratio and an unsafe situation for children. And sometimes, the reaction was, well, a lot of these kids don't show up every day. So maybe, but as a licensor, I had to say, well, every time I come out, you have too many. So they're showing up. So what else can we do? And then when I found out what the amount was, I complained as a state employee, like, do you guys know what you're doing? And have been for 20 years now. Heaven forbid if they send out a survey, because whatever they are asking, if it's the color, is blue a good color for the sky? I may agree, but then I'm going to give you a little dissertation on why your subsidy is not paying for the cost of care and why that is the quality of childcare in our state is not where it should be. The ones who are on the phone really hate it when they get me because like, get a pen. You're going to have to do some writing. But that is what's going to change it. And that is what's changed it. We have gone up probably 25% higher than it was when I first started. So we have another 15% to go. And we're going to keep pushing. So early achievers is the quality rating scale. If you're looking for a 3 is very good. But again, everybody's not participating. And I wouldn't say that it's not a quality center just because they're not participating. So you'd have to inquire a little bit more. There has been, so the people who cannot opt out of early achievers are the people who need to accept the subsidy. So in all areas where it's heavily subsidized, like Yakima County, which is where our early learning center is, 80% of our clientele have working connection subsidy. That's all they can afford. So we have to take that. And if they didn't have the university supporting the early learning center, we would, if we were standalone, we wouldn't make it financially. I don't know how we would. And so I have, quite the heart for all the small centers that are trying to survive, and we've just got to do better. So I know the Early Achievers is working on making it a little bit more user-friendly. But if you can opt out, a lot of centers have opted out. If they don't need to take subsidized students, then they do opt out. So it's a good program, but it's not the only thing that's gonna tell you it's high quality. And I think they have a little checklist for you to look at too. And then last week, we talked to the Commerce Department, which I'm blown away by how committed they have become to early childhood. Now the provider in Ellensburg did receive one of the grants from the Commerce Department. I received one at the university. The feedback that we gave the department and the state was it's wonderful to see this investment in early childhood, but the way that grant was not developed, but delivered, would that be the right way?
It's,
Was
requirements is just not accessible, it's not.
Right.
accessible At all.
The information, it's very difficult to navigate if you are just a early learning provider, right? We don't have business degrees. We, haven't done a lot of grant writing because there were never any grants for us. Now suddenly there are, which is great, but they also need more technical assistance, which now they are doing. So that's really exciting. So last week, and I put her email in here because I think their website's not actually up and running yet because I was searching for it.
So there's a page, it just doesn't have as much detail of like what we learned.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was looking for. So the person, if you are an employer, if you have an employer that you want to investigate, Paige is a good person to start with. And things that she brought up last week that I was like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Like family-friendly offices and family-friendly workplaces. I'm like, oh, and we're talking about you had that situation?
It did, yeah, we adopted when I worked together. I guess it was, show them the Department of Health or the other incident work policy, which they already have written out policies and like documents you can use, and they fully welcome anyone to use it. So I brought actually both of my children were at in the office for like the month 3 when I was like transitioning over, which is great. So it also got my children used to like other people, and then everyone was like, oh baby, but it was good. And then kind of forces the hand to like have to figure something out when your staff don't have childcare.
Right, it also brings attention to people who don't have children. They're like, oh, this is a thing.
Right.
Like, that's a lot of work. As much as I'm happy to see we're kind of encouraging that, I also can attest to a lot of workplaces that were like, it's not professional, your baby crying, whatever, including the university. So we had a huge meeting about that. And ultimately they did say in your office, you can have your child. Obviously you can't have them while you're teaching a course. And yet, which is kind of funny because we also, as university professors, if I have a student who says, I can't come to class because my babysitter fell through, I know what will say, bring your kid. We got crayons, we got stuff, or if it's a baby, just bring the baby with you. And so we've always done that as professors, and yet it wasn't being extended to our staff and our professors. So gladly we were able to shift it, but there was a lot of pushback from, older generations who, either stayed home when their kids were young, so they really never dealt with it, or had family who could help them. But that's just not the situation for most families now. So I think the rest of this are just additional resources. There is a lot out there, and they are quite good. So I'm really happy with Washington. What was that?
The Fathers Network, that's what they had presented last week Investing in Children. They had that person come on.
Great. I mean, they're there and they're doing good work, and now we just have to showcase it so everybody becomes more available. So with that, any anything else I can answer for you?
You guys ready to be providers? Ready to do this?
What I'm hoping is though that you will feel comfortable encouraging some of the people that you know who are doing it to look into. And DCYF has a lot of Spanish speaking translators and providers, or actually licensors, who we know that this is necessary. So we don't want them to feel so isolated. They're part of the community, and so we do have resources for them.